It occurred to me this week, we've had a lot of rain. The grass is all growing. We've had to mow the lawn a couple times this year. It occurred to me, I should have thought of this years and years ago, that if you want your kids to mow the lawn, wouldn't it make sense to make the lawnmower look like the Batmobile? I mean, think about it for a moment. Like, go out and mow the lawn, I don't know. But if you made a lawnmower that looked like Captain America's shield or the Batmobile or something cool like that, then maybe the kids would want to do it. I wish I had thought of that years ago. Maybe it's not too late. Maybe I could market that. You never know. Several years ago, in a galaxy far, far away, I was preaching in another church, and for some reason, I had this gray sport coat. You know, it wasn't like a blue blazer. It wasn't dark. It wasn't white. It was gray. And so I began to preach this series through 1 John, which has 5 chapters. And I broke it apart paragraph by paragraph. So it took me like 12 or 15 weeks, right, to get through 1 John. And I decided I would try a little experiment. So every Sunday, I wore that same gray sport coat. All right? So 12, 15 weeks in a row, I'm wearing the same gray sport coat. And at the end of that 12 or 15 weeks, I'm shaking hands at the back door, kind of down, and this older member says, "Hey, what's wrong, Craig?" I said, "Well, all right, I wore the same coat for 12 weeks, and no one has noticed." And this older person said, "It's not that we didn't notice, we just don't care." There's always something new that we can think about with Easter, and there's always something new that we can recognize. The problem with preaching about Easter is it's a story that we what? We all know the ending of the story. There's no surprises, right? You know, Jesus dies, you know, he's buried, and it's always the same thing every year. I want to say that Easter isn't just easier. And I'll get to what that means. But there's so much more to Easter. I mean, think of the story for a while. You've got this unorthodox rabbi who, because of his relationship with people, causes the establishment to want to actually have him executed. He travels around. He's supported, the Bible tells us, by women, very uncommon in that day. He preaches something that's radically new. The people become nervous to the point where they want to what? Have him killed. And there's in this story of Jesus something that's always new. You know, he can keep a crowd of 12, sometimes 100, once in a while up to 1,000, but in the end, what happens? Nobody. Everybody betrays him. The miracles, the wise advice he has, the teachings, they neglect all that. And they run to save their own skin. And of course, you know, they get the government involved. And what happens when you get the government involved, right? Never a good thing there. And they get him to execute him. And so the rest is what? History. Or actually, it's his story. What's the hardest job you could think of? Maybe being a nuclear physicist. Maybe being a brain surgeon. I don't know. Open heart surgery. Maybe being a mom. That's a pretty tough job, right? How about trying to save the whole world? And that's what Jesus comes to do, right? He comes to save the whole world. But the first Easter experience wasn't like what we do. Everyone dresses up in their bright Easter colors. Jim and I were talking about, you know, where did these colors come from? Where do they come from at the holidays? We were talking about that this morning. But it wasn't like that the first time. It wasn't easy for the people who were involved. Open really quick. This is not our text for the day, but open to Luke chapter 24. Remember the night of Jesus' trial. In Luke's gospel, he's so upset that he's sweating drops of blood. Psychiatry tells us today that there is a phenomenon where you can be so stressed out that the small capillaries in your face will rupture. And so when you sweat, it looks like you're doing what? Sweating drops of blood. That's how upset Jesus is. Everybody leaves him. He's brutally crucified. He goes through the pain and the humiliation and the abandonment. And Luke picks up the story on that first day of the week. Luke 24:1, that first day of the week, early at the dawn. They go to the tomb, right? You know, the angels are there. Why do you look for the living among the dead? Verse 6, the angels say, he is not here, but has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee, the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified and on the third day rise. And they remembered this. Returning from the tomb, they told all these things to the 11. And who is this group? The first group to see this, it's a group of at least 5 women. Now it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and other women. So that's plural, so there's at least 5. Who told these things to the apostles. And the apostles said, this is great. Let's go get some Cadbury eggs and let's celebrate with a ham. Oh, wait, no. That's not at all what they said. Isn't that interesting? Jewish people don't eat ham, and what's the most popular? We're breaking tradition. We're having brisket today. So, look at verse 11. Talk about it being hard. Here you are. You're a woman where in that day and age they couldn't testify in court. They weren't allowed into the inner circle of the temple. They're marginalized. They're in a society that looks at them as property. And so here they are. They're going to be the first evangelists. In verse 11, the words of the women, right? But these words seemed to them, the apostles, as an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter rose and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen cloths by themselves and went home marveling at what had happened. Wow. So I followed Jesus all these years. He's taken away, he's arrested, he's crucified, he dies, and now what? Now the body's gone. Peter doesn't know what's going on. The first Easter was not easy. But for us, though, it's a little bit different. Easter isn't just easier. And think about it for just a moment. We were talking in our class on forgiveness Sunday mornings. One of the best things about an apology we were talking about this morning, peace of mind. Because now I can have that clear conscience. Because of Easter, you and I have an easy access to having a guilt-free conscience. Because of the sins that we commit, the things that we know that prick our conscience, that keep us up at night, that interfere with our relationship with God. We know because of Easter that that's been wiped clean. God wipes the slate clean. Any John Wayne fans here? Yeah, okay. Sands of Iwo Jima. You remember that movie? He's Sergeant Stryker. And he says, and I'm going to get the quote right because everybody misquotes this. What do you think he says? Life is hard, right? Okay. This is how the quote actually goes. Life is tough. It's even tougher when you're stupid. Life is hard. Why make it even harder? When I think about how Easter makes things easier, I don't have to jump through a bunch of religious rituals to have my conscience clear. I need to be connected to that resurrection. So why make reaching God even tougher? In fact, for us, Easter isn't about us reaching out for God at all. It's about God reaching out to us. Gospel. Gospel simply means good news. And the good news is that God comes and He forgives us. Well, besides the fact that Easter isn't just easier, it isn't just simpler. All right? We sat the kids down here during the Kids' Cornerstone. I said, here's the story of Easter. What? God dies for us. He's buried. And He's what? Raised again. That's pretty simple. I'm not good with math. My mom told me there's 3 types of people in the world. Those who know math and those who don't. I'm not that great with math. I'm not that great with math, but that's pretty simple. You put that together, right? God becomes flesh. He's the Son of God. He's buried. He rises from the dead. It's a simple story. Easter is a simple story. I don't need volumes and volumes of commentary and of dictionaries and of encyclopedias to get down the story of Easter. Now, that doesn't mean that it's so simplistic that it's something I should neglect. But I am saying it's a pretty simple storyline. God becomes flesh. People kill Him on the cross. They bury Him in a tomb. 3 days later, He rises again. So Easter isn't just easier. It isn't just simple. And it isn't just efficient. We like efficiency in our world, right? You go to Walmart or wherever you get your laundry detergent, and now the only type of laundry detergents you're going to find are high efficiency detergents because we have high efficiency appliances. We like the idea of efficiency. Simpler steps, economy of movement, right? We're into all of that. Well, what could be more simpler than God doing all the work? Nothing you or I could do, buy, earn, achieve to get our salvation. God does it all. He comes to earth. I don't have to go to heaven to find him. He comes here. I don't have to die to win his favor. He does what? He's the one who dies for me. Try resurrecting yourself. Right? Now, I'll admit, in the early morning when I get up, until I had my first cup of coffee, it probably looked like something from The Walking Dead, right? It's hard to resurrect yourself. God has efficiently done it all. He comes to earth. He dies in our place. He's resurrected, and it's his love and his promises fulfilled. I know it. That's terrible. Excuse me. All right, so Easter isn't just easier, simpler, efficient. It's not just about power or purpose. Now, the Easter story is what gives us our power as believers, and it's also the direction for our purpose. If I were to say, take your order of service, flip it over, and write on there, what's the purpose? Why do we exist as believers? I might get several different answers, but I'm hoping a continual theme would be something based from Matthew chapter 28, 18 through 20. After Jesus is resurrected, after those 40 days before he ascends into heaven, he says to the disciples, what? All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go, make disciples of all the nations, teaching them all I have commanded you, baptizing them what? In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. Well, then teaching them all I command you. Lo, I am with you always, what? To the end of the age. So what's our purpose? Because Jesus did die, remember we looked at Philippians chapter 2, God exalts him, gives him the name above all other names. Remember that from the cornerstone? Jesus says in Matthew 28, because of all of this, all authority in heaven and in earth has been given to me. Go and do this. Now we have our purpose. Because of the resurrection, we're to make disciples. The Easter story gives us our purpose and our direction. Make disciples, baptize people, teach them what Jesus says. And finally, here's where I'm really going. Easter isn't just easier. Easter is everything. For the believer, Easter, our faith is built on the resurrection. Flip over to 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Our whole faith is built on the resurrection. I read through the book of Acts once, and I tried to highlight what was the consistent message. The early church constantly was spreading over and over again. And the continual theme that I always saw in the book of Acts was the resurrection. It's what separated people from Judaism and Christianity. This idea that, yes, God becomes flesh and he's resurrected. It's what their entire message was. So our faith is built on the resurrection. Not just that God enters our existence, not just that he died, but that he lives again. And Paul will write here, if you're in 1 Corinthians 15, if Christ is proclaimed as raised from the dead, how can some of you say there is no resurrection? Who's he writing to? Christians. Where are they? They're in an assembly. They're in church together. And obviously some of them don't believe that there's a resurrection. And so he's going to clear that up. If there is no resurrection, well, then not even Christ has been raised. And if Christ has not been raised, verse 14, then our preaching is in vain. Your faith is in vain. We're found to be misrepresenting God because we testified about God, that he raised Christ, whom he did not raise, if it's true that the dead are not raised. For if the dead are not raised, not Christ, not even Christ has been raised. If Christ has not been raised, your faith is futile, you're still in your sins. Those who have fallen asleep, the Christians who've already died, they've perished. Verse 19, if in Christ we have hope in this world only, we are of most people to be pitied. Have you ever heard it said, well, let's just say that all there is to this whole existence is the universe we live in? What if there really is no God? At least if we live as Christians, you know what? We've done something right with our lives. Even if we're wrong, at least we've lived good lives. It makes sense to be a Christian, even if God doesn't exist, because I'm good to people, and I live a good life, and I do good things, and I'm all this good stuff. And so, at least if there's no God, Paul says no. No. If there is no God, if God hasn't been raised from the dead, no, it's not, hey, at least you lived a good moral life. Yeah, that's noteworthy. No, he says you should be most pitied. You're the biggest fools there are. There is no God. Let's eat, drink, for tomorrow we die. Let's get all that we can get in this world, because that's all there is this world. So no, don't say, well, at least if I live as a Christian, I've done something good. No, you're a fool, according to Paul. You should be pitied. But in fact, the good news, verse 20, Christ has been raised from the dead, the first fruits. In other words, he's the first to be resurrected, and we'll follow in that. Because of a man, Adam, death comes in the world, so the resurrection comes through a man, and that will be Christ. Each in his order. Verse 23. Christ the first fruits, and then at his coming, those who belong to Christ. And then comes the end, and Christ will deliver the kingdom back over to the Father. So Easter is everything. It's God's good news. It's him bringing life from death. It's him giving us eternity, the everlasting love of God, giving us all that he has, because he is risen. And he is risen indeed. The Easter story is everything because we blew it. But God makes everything new. That time when you really, really say, I'll never get over this. I'll never get past this. I can never fix this. God says, I know you blew it. But I have a story I want you to live. I've got a story that gives you confidence to face every trial. I have a story that helps you beat every temptation. I have a story that helps you win in the end. So may we live that resurrection story with the confidence that God had in mind when he came to our world.